Hey guys, this is Whistler, and I'm making a video where I recorded my Pokemon D&D designs for you guys to look at. These are some of the little sketches that I've been making for a while now, kind of as a practice. Um, they're good practice too. It's a nice way of kind of being flexible about making interesting designs, interesting characters. I was kind of influenced to start recording them and putting them online by uh, a YouTube channel called ABD Illustrates, and I'll put a link in the description because he's really cool. You should check him out. He has some cool videos where he creates princesses and D&D designs instead, like Disney princesses, and that's really awesome. So I wanted to bring you through my process on making these. I'm going to make all, hopefully, we'll see how far I get, but I want to make at least one Pokemon from all of the original 151 designs of Red and Blue, the first generation of Pokemon. Not every single Pokemon, but at least one Pokemon from every single evolutionary line in that generation. Starting with number 2, Ivysaur. Just because Ivysaur was my favorite of the Bulbasaur line. I really like Ivysaur's design. There's something interesting that they do in Generation 1 where the middle Pokemon of 3 was always kind of an interesting offshoot of the color palette, in this case a little bit darker. And what I ended up doing with a lot of these is I take one of the design elements that really stuck out to me and I try to think out how that would look on a D&D character, a Dungeons & Dragons character, which is more of a fantasy, high fantasy concept. In this case, I decided to do the bulb on Ivysaur's back first, and I decided that that looked kind of like a backpack, which led me to making this little critter with a really big backpack. I thought that the best character class that would work with a big backpack would be the Artificer, which happens to be one of my favorite classes. So we're starting out with my favorite class in D&D, and also one that's not easily accessible. It's not in the main books. They're currently tinkering with it online in their playtests, trying to make it into a finalized version. You can find it under the Unearthed Arcana PDFs online. But it's really cool. It's coming along pretty nicely now. They've got 2 different versions of it out, and essentially the idea is that they create magic items and potions and weird trinkets and contraptions, and use those as their spells essentially. So you can imagine why they would have a lot of gear. They would need a lot of gears and wrenches and different types of things. So in this case, I decided to create this greenish-brown backpack. I especially liked the Artificer concept because you could have this green backpack with a bright pink, like potion-like material in it, or like some kind of magical thing representing a flower as a color scheme. So that's where I kind of began the design process. As you can see, I decided to take the kind of frog-like, scaly nature of Ivysaur and turn it into the goblin race. I really like goblins. I think they're really cool, and you can play them in 5th edition of Dungeons & Dragons as one of the races in Volo's Guide to Monsters. And goblins are super fun. I decided against giving her traditional goblin ears. I gave her more floppy ears, kind of to make her a little bit more round and friendly looking, but still had the opportunity to give her those big red eyes and the wide, toothy mouth. A lot of this character was focused on keeping the very square nature of Ivysaur intact. Ivysaur's scales are all square patches. His leaves are all square serrated edges. So I tried to keep that in the design by having a kind of patchwork little dress that she wears with square patches on it. I thought that worked pretty well. And of course she has a bunch of potions and vials slung across her belt. I made her hair the sort of same green texture as the leaves because why not? She's a goblin, you can kind of have fun with some of the more weird design elements. That's one of the things I like about picking a goblin for this. It's kind of a more obvious choice maybe because but Bulbasaur and Ivysaur already look kind of like little goblin dudes. But it worked for this one. I thought it kind of was a cute design. And of course I'm riffing off the color scheme here and not being perfectly accurate. The subclasses for the Artificer are still sort of up in the air, so it's kind of, we're not sure where they'll end up, but the most obvious subclass for this particular Artificer would be the Alchemist, who makes potions and concoctions. I think definitely this is a homebrew, scrappy-looking Artificer girl, kind of coming away from home, Kiki's Delivery style, with all of her homemade potion kits and stuff. One of the things you'll see me struggling with as we keep going is finding a good style for these things. Like, these are going to be speed paints. They're all pretty quick. This one only took about an hour and a half to 2 hours to make. But I was trying to find some way to make it a fun style that was very line art heavy, while simultaneously being a good way of illustrating the colors that the Pokemon had. I ended up with a more thick line art style, but in this one I started out with a more, not with black line art, but with a dark green line art, and that ended up biting me in the butt afterwards because, you know, it means you don't get as vibrant a color since you were trying to match this lighter, desaturated line art. At least that was the experience I had. It's a problem I have as an artist, so. Next we have Charizard, number 6, I believe. I decided to pick Charizard because I liked the complementary color of the wings, the sort of dark blue-green. Neither of the pre-evolutions have that, so I really wanted to have that as a design element. I thought that was really cool. This was the hardest one for me, actually. The other two designs I made in this video, I already had a couple of preliminary sketches of them in my sketchbook, trying out different things, and in this one I kind of came in blind, trying to figure it out as I went. So this one took like 3 hours, while the others took less than 2. I eventually went with this idea based on the fire tail that Charizard has, this flame tail, probably the most iconic part of the Charizard design, among many things. I ended up making it into a lantern, like a large curved lantern. There were a lot of different ideas I had, but I went with that one because I really liked the concept of it, like this, almost this weaponized lantern that you could use maybe to light lamps along a road or something. It was a very interesting concept, and it kind of bred a lot of character ideas. And among them was this sort of robed lamplighter figure, like someone who would go along roads and light the lamps at night to protect people from monsters. And I thought that was a kind of cool concept for a cleric, like a forge domain cleric, for a lamplighter god, like a god of the hearth and the home and protective fire. Perhaps forge domain, perhaps light domain. I'm not sure exactly which, but I like forge because it's kind of a unique take on the forge cleric. A lot of forge clerics are more blacksmithy. And this is a bit of an odd direction to take Charizard, but I wanted to go in a unique direction for it. And I thought this was a good, like, obviously it's a spellcaster class, but it also feels kind of protective and powerful because of this role that I decided they had, where they would guard. They're like guardians of traveling and the travelers. They would go along roads and make sure monsters wouldn't harm nightly travelers of the road. And they would have these lanterns, which are kind of symbols of their god. And I just really hit upon that idea. I really liked it. And it worked with the character too, because you have these big wings that Charizard has, and I liked the robe aesthetic for that, kind of reminiscent of those wings, as well as tails of the coat being reminiscent of the Charizard's tail. And Charizard as well is a big blocky guy. He's a big boy. So I thought it would be nice to have a bigger design, not very thin or wispy. This one I think I ended up making it an elf. There were some more obvious choices like lizard folk or whatever, but elf was the thing. I also played with fire genasi, which is like for those of you who don't know, a half fire elemental person, like the spawn of a fire Jinny or an Efreet, as they're called. I had some cool ideas there, like maybe they have stained glass skin with fire inside or something like that. But that's kind of a busy design element, and I ended up scrapping it because there's already so much stuff going on here, and I wanted something simpler. So I went with an elf essentially just because of the horns that Charizard has. I wanted something that reminded me of that. And it was either that or a tiefling, because tieflings are demonic spawn. They're half demons or devils, and they might have horns. But I went with an elf because I thought it was a bit more of an unorthodox choice, and maybe a little bit more fitting for Charizard. I also struggled a lot with the color in this, because there were a lot of different choices. I really liked the blue again, and I was tempted to just put that everywhere, but I decided to err on the side of being truer to the design itself, but it took a while to get there. It took a while to figure out the correct balance of what that looked like. I decided that he should have pauldrons and this fun hair knot, a ponytail holder, I guess, that had the symbols of this forge god, the lamplighter god, on it, which, along with the lantern, would be kind of the holy symbols that he would use to cast spells.
Sometimes there are things that get me down. They can be hard to deal with. But I try not to worry too much about the things that I can't change. So I just accept them.
Finally, for this video anyway, was the Blastoise Squirtle line. And again, I decided to pick the middle of this line, Wartortle. You can tell I really like the middle evolutions of these Gen 1 starters. I like how kind of weird and different they are. Like Wartortle has all these weird elements that neither Squirtle nor Blastoise have, like this fluffy tail and the strange Hermes-esque ears, and this more purple color scheme. I just think it's pretty neat. I kind of wish they'd done a little bit more of that with Blastoise too. And Blastoise, like, I thought about doing Blastoise for this one, but there was only kind of one way you could go with Blastoise, and that was to just do something about the cannons. And cannons aren't very open to interpretation. There's only one real thing you can do with cannons. Or maybe I'm just unimaginative, I don't know. But I really like Wartortle. And I went with, again, a slightly more obvious choice here, which is to make the Wartortle's shell a huge shield. And I'm not sure exactly how I got onto this. I think because I realized that the curly tail could be a kind of fun net, and the wings on the ears could be kind of like a gladiator's helmet or a centurion helmet. I ended up going more gladiator because not only did it fit the D&D fighting scrappy aesthetic more, but it gave me the opportunity to do a few more weapons and a slightly more unique design that wasn't just a copy of a Roman centurion, element for element. I did a lot of I had a lot of fun with this one. I ended up making her a dwarf because of the sort of squat, scrappy-looking nature of Wartortle and line in general. I thought it was very dwarfish. It worked really well. I had a couple of different ideas for the race. The race is always kind of a hard one for these, but I went with dwarf. And of course, I had to give her a beard because she's a dwarf. You can tell here, this is the sort of style I ended up settling on. And there's a progression. I did these in order of appearance, and there's a progression here that you can see, where I really started leaning into this deep black line art style, which I think works really well because it's pretty simple and quick to do for these speed paints, and it's also really fun, and it's got a good iconic look to it. I think I really like the Okami games, if you've ever played those. And this is vaguely inspired, I think, by the style of Sumi brush painting illustrations that they did for their characters. I own their art book. It's very good. You should go check it out if you haven't. Anyway, that's the inspiration behind the line art. As for the character, I don't know if gladiators always use these nets, but I have a very strong image in my head of the gladiator net with the sort of spikes at the end to ensnare opponents so you can get in close and spear them or whatever. And I liked that idea. There's also a background. You can have backgrounds in D&D that give you a little bit of extra stuff. It essentially says what you were before you were an adventurer. And I like to think about those. And there is a gladiator background. It's part of the entertainer background, like a subsection. So this is an entertainer gladiator, and the class would be just a fighter, like a simple fighter, and give some love to the fighter class. Probably a champion fighter, which is like the most bones, bare bones essentials fighter you could ever be. Just a straight up champion, maybe a battle master. But I don't see this person in a squadron. I see her kind of by herself in a huge arena, in a sand pit, kind of with her own cool stage name or whatever, like that scene from Avatar: The Last Airbender. Anyway, the color came a lot quicker for this one, so I was really pleased with it, and I hope you like it as well. And that's about it. Thanks a lot for watching. Most of this I think will be up on my Patreon, because I have Patreon exclusive videos and stuff, but I wanted to make it at least a couple of them for everybody else so you could see them. I hope you enjoy, and peace.